This week's Laser Force podcast is brought to you by the wonderful work of Marco Caldwell, aka Beardiful from Loveland, who has so lovingly designed a number of different logos for our tournaments and for individual sites. Big shout out to you, Marco. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, man. If you guys notice, the logo has actually changed for this week's Resupply, so give that a look when you can. Thanks, heaps, Marco. We really appreciate the work. Welcome back to the Resupply with me, Guy Next Door.
And me, DK.
Bringing you your mostly weekly double tap of all things Laser Force and Space Marines.
Yeah, sorry about last week.
Yeah. I fell victim to the Kiwi AIDS among having to shoot off to a family reunion. So we're back, and
your whole country should be quarantined.
I kind of was. Last weekend we were in the middle of the bush, and I was without cell phone reception for 2 days. No cell phones, no internet, nothing. Which, you know, I'd imagine some of you younger kids would be like, what the fuck is that like?
It was terrible,
it's liberating until you get back into cell phone reception and your phone goes ape shit. But yeah, it's nice to be back and you know, back in front of the mic with you, my friend.
Yeah, I will say it felt kind of special to me, though. We got like 6 or 7 sad reacts when I posted that we weren't going to be posting a show. So thanks for making us feel special, guys.
This week I was like, maybe we should do like a poll on Facebook and be like, hey, who actually listens to the pod? But I'm sure somebody will add some like bullshit answers, so I figured we'll just guess at it.
Yeah, somebody would post something negative on the internet. This is shocking information for me.
Well, I was gonna rely on the YouTube views stat, but I'm fairly certain I account for like half of those myself. So
manipulate those stats. Just get one of those click farms in Bangladesh or whatever.
I've got enough cousins here that maybe we can like pay some of them to do it.
There you
go. All right, so I guess we're following on from where we left off on the last pod in our series of our deep dive into the Space Marines podcast. Oh, actually, just before we go, I'd like to preface that I'm still a little bit sick, so I've got my my sexy sick voice on. So if I sound worse than normal, that's why. Yeah. So what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, last time we talked about the art of the medic, and I guess this would be a good time to sort of segue into just what our sort of order of operations is when it comes to training new players, since that's how we sort of prefaced it last time, was contrary to what a lot of people kind of suggest with making scout the first thing that everybody learns. I like to train the new players on medic to get them some exposure to how to operate as part of a team unit, and also to kind of minimize in a tournament situation the kind of deficits that you can experience on the offensive end by putting them on medic. But I would say scout's usually the second thing that I do. Would you kind of agree with that approach?
Yeah, so we kind of go the reverse order. We normally chuck people as scout, but I think that's because I haven't really like given much thought into kind of the nuances of which one teaches you more from the get-go. So I think like learning to play scout, you know, really gets you into that offensive mindset, and to be fair is probably the least kind of jump from standard Laser Force where you run around and you shoot people. You know, that's the name of the game. But you're right, I think medic kind of teaches you some different elements, specifically the teamwork stuff. So it's something that I'd potentially like to implement with the new players coming in. But yeah, scout would definitely be the next one on my list as well.
Yeah, well, and I would preface that by saying I was speaking specifically in a capacity for like leagues and tournaments and stuff. If it's just a practice night, you're going to play scout pretty much the entire night the first time you're
the randomizer
there, just to kind of learn the ropes and figure out what's going on. Yeah, and the matchmaker sort of accounts for that. I think they give you something like 10 games of scout or something before you do anything else.
Now, also just on the medic stuff, I want to give special shout out to our man, Than, who, that old guy who used to do the podcast with me.
Oh, you mean Night
yeah,
Owl?
yeah. The sooner about a half hour after that podcast launch, he was like, "What the fuck, man? I thought you were gonna get me on." So sorry, buddy. Like, completely flaked on that one, but that's all right. We got the best scout on the current Laser Force scene in DK here with us, giving you his hot take on on the scout position.
No, you had the hot snakes, buddy. You were the one who got sick.
All right, so where do you want to start first?
Well, I would say with Scout, so we'll do the same thing kind of last time. I'll give you my top 5 kind of skills for Scout that I think are important to teach newer players, and just things to bear in mind overall when you're playing Scout. Obviously, there are way more than 5 things that you have to do, but if I constrain myself to talking about 5 things, then the podcast will be a reasonable length.
Now, fuck it, talk all day.
I could talk about laser tag all day.
Sometimes we do.
Since, I can't play it. Although we're only, I think we decided 7 weeks out at this point from nationals, maybe closer to 6 weeks by the time everybody listens to this. So we're actually getting back into the swing of things, and which led me to my post about I need to up my training regimen a little bit.
You and me both. Oof.
Yeah, but I guess that would be number 1 for Scout is use the term Scout as literally as possible. It's called Scout for a reason. So make sure you're doing some actual scouting for your team. You have the ability to be out in the field much longer than anybody else because of how quickly you resupply. Use that to your advantage since you resupply shots twice as fast as anyone else, and your lives are going to go up at a very, very quick rate as well. So even 1 resupply, you get 10 shots and 5 lives. That's so many. I know newer players like, oh my God, I'm low. I need to get like 3 or 4 resups. Not if you're Scout. If you get 1 resup, that should hold you at least for a minute, if not longer, at that point. So the big thing is use your ability to scout to your advantage. Don't crowd your resupply. That is like the first thing that I stress to newer players is, especially as a scout, don't crowd your resupply. Because, yeah, you can help on the defense, but you're not a 3-hit.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to absorb nearly as much kind of pressure as a heavy or a commander. In really bad scenarios, you're just an extra reset for that enemy commander or heavy who comes in and just breaks your resup. So don't play right next to your resupply. Don't crowd them. If you're going to help defend, which is something you do have to do as a scout sometimes, defend them from a little bit out, at least like 1 or 2 backtrack lengths away from the resupply. So if something does go wrong, you have a fallback position, then maybe you have a secondary fallback position, and they can't just come in and tag you again along with your resupply because you have a good backtrack on them.
Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves is having, and it's probably the same for most people that play competitively, is having 1 or even 2 scouts just hanging around the resupply. And yeah, you see it with a lot of newer players. They'll sort of hang around and pick a corner and go stand on that corner and like look around the corners and you
yeah, and it's kind of understandable the first time that you're playing a limited lives kind of game. You're like, oh my God, I really don't want to get killed out. I have to stay close to the medic so I don't die. But you're not quite as squishy as a scout as you might otherwise imagine. Getting 5 lives a tap and having a cap of 30 lives is so many. It's so hard to get killed.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. Like if you hang around, you basically become another reset, especially if you are a newer player. Because a lot of the time, gun drops down. Hashtag keep your gun up. And and you get tagged and then basically get reset to hell. So yeah.
Yeah, even if you're just kind of 1 backtrack length away, you're still able to provide some more visibility and some communication. Like there are all kinds of spots that I would tell people to cover in the Sacramento maze or things like that, just to kind of keep an eye out. For Auckland, I mean, I haven't been to your guys' field, but based on the videos and stuff I've seen in that kind of that downstairs resupply area, what do you guys call it?
Disco,
the disco?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it has those kind of two corners where you have your heavy stationed in one corner and your resupply in the other
Mm.
corner. But if a scout's back there, they can get out of there and look all the way around the corner into where an attacker is actually going to be
Yeah,
coming in.
exactly.
That's the bare minimum of where they need to be, if not farther away. So that way they can let the heavy know somebody's coming well before they actually
Mm.
get there. So you're not just kind of tense waiting to see lights coming around the corner.
And part of that too is making sure that your calls are being heard. There's no point in seeing that stuff happen and not communicating it, because then you get smashed.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had to retrain myself after years of mostly playing three hit at tournaments. But then when we were prepping for 2017 Nats in Sacramento, starting with the West Coast that we had that year, it seemed like things were kind of working a little bit better with me playing Scout and having Venom and Yama play three hit just for the overall team dynamic. I'm like, okay, this is interesting to do. And I took a lot of inspiration. I learned a lot of tips from Lejeune, who had played Scout for a number of years at that point, was so good at being in the midfield, communicating, letting people know what was going on, really kind of taking that Scout term quite literally, and was a super big help to the team. So I was like, that's what I need to do as a Scout. I have to retrain my mindset to, I'm not the person who's going to go in and break the other team. I'm the person who's going to help my team by letting them know what is going on at all times.
Just quickly, shout out to my man Lejeune. Happy birthday, Jiff. Hope it's a good one. I think it'll probably be his birthday when this podcast comes out. So if he listens, happy birthday, buddy.
Good job by you, Jeff.
But yeah, like that communication spreads to the offense too. So we like to train our guys to get a good kind of rotation happening, so that everyone's not gathered back at the resup at the same time. And so being able to communicate effectively with your scout, hey, I'm going back, or can you stay out a little longer, or you go back, I'm going to stay out for a bit, or whatever, like all that stuff you can do. Like, make sure you talk to your teammates.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I always tell newer players as well, that in the event that a resupply gets crowded, the scouts have to be the ones to take it on themselves. You need to
I'll
leave.
take one and go.
Take one and go. Even if you're only going out, pushing out just a little bit, you're not the person who needs to be there. So that, I think, makes a good segue to the second point, which is support your three hits. That is, I think,
massive. Maybe
the most important thing to do as a scout.
We were talking about this at Members Night on Tuesday, actually. And just the importance, like you gotta know what your role is on the team. And sometimes your role is to be that decoy to take the heavy fire away from your commander, so commander can come in and put him down. If you can put one or two hits on the heavy, and distract them long enough for your commander to come in and take them without getting a hit off, it's hugely important.
Yeah, that's maybe the number one way that you can break into an enemy resupply, is by having the scout actually take the lead to get one out of the heavy. Again, going back to 2017, I saw this in operation when Rusty would go on a lot of his attack runs. That is what he was telling Baden and Fredo most of the time, was just get one out of the heavy and I'll take care of the rest. So if I can put down the heavy in one shot, he's usually quick enough that he can do that before the heavy tags him, or maybe the heavy's faced up looking the other way at the scout. Then boom, he's in, and sayonara to your resupply at that point. So scouts can be so useful in that regard. Even if you just take one out of the heavy, then your commander can get in on a one shot. Or if you draw the heavy's fire so that you get hit instead of them, that's great. I mean, it doesn't feel very glorious at the time when it's like, okay, well, great, I just mutual with the heavy. That doesn't really do anything for the team score. But if that allows your commander to get in and get some resets and get a couple of medikits and things like that, then you've just done a great service to your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the same token, if you're more on the defensive end, calling things out for your heavy, or putting down an enemy scout so that way they can focus on the enemy three hit who's coming in, that's another way of supporting your three hit. So you can support them both on offense and on defense.
Exactly right. Like, and giving that information back to your heavy means that they can make some, important decisions around whether or not they take a resupply as well. You know, because there's always the potential that your heavy runs sort of a little low, especially if a commander has just come out and they're transitioning with their own heavy to come attack you. If you're just in that lull where there's just a scout attacking and you have a scout back, that's really important information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So support your 3 hits. I mean, we like to think that the positions are pretty balanced on the whole, but we know that there is kind of a hierarchy on most teams. Usually your kind of best offensive player is going to be playing commander. So if you can maximize what they do, like you would in any other sport, if it's basketball, you want to get the ball to the guy who is going to score the most points. If it's football, you're going to want to block for your quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You have to know where the points are coming from. That's your goal on the team, is to make sure the team scores the most points, because that's how you win the game. You can't win it by yourself.
Exactly. Hashtag do your job.
Do that job.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, if everyone has a good understanding of what their role is, and executes it well, it means that your other teammates will trust you to know what you're supposed to be doing, and vice versa. You know that you can trust them to know that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And yeah, there ain't no winning without no trust. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you can notice so quickly with teams as you progress in skill, is like on the better teams where you still have players who are good enough that they could probably lead another team being a 3-hit. If they're playing scout and they know how to do it effectively, it makes such a huge difference. Like, yeah, scout might be one of the things that you put the newer players on, but once you have somebody who really knows how to play scout well, the differential is just unbelievable. A good scout really is worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely. You look at someone like Hoodlum, who that dude somehow has a teleporter to get him to the enemy medic, to always at least get one hit off the enemy medic. He's someone that sort of has a master's degree in how to play scout.
Yeah, Hoodlum is definitely one. I would say Jared Boomtrain is another. Baden, at least when he plays with Rusty, I'm sure he's a great scout in other environments as well, but especially being able to piggyback off of Rusty, he supports him super well. And having guys like that is part of the reason that Rusty is so successful, in addition to, just being a really damn good player.
From, like, our side, like the King brothers from our side, like the speed at which they play the game makes them really valuable as scouts as well, because they can move around the maze so quickly and pass on information quicker than most. So yeah, those guys are very good scouts as well. There's a bunch of them on the
2K King 2K King definitely earned that all-star scout rating at the last Nats, because it was super valuable to you guys and super pain in the ass to the other teams to try to deal with it, to keep his dumb ass at a helm. God.
I mean, basically, as soon as, because he's, we play a very free-flowing style of Laser Force at Auckland. So to go to a maze where arena control is such an important thing, it almost negates your speed if all you're doing is controlling one section of the maze. So he was able to adapt pretty well. And work really well with his brother when Leech switched to the commander position.
Yeah. But to some extent, I think the speed still made a bit of a difference, because I know some players on other teams, on my team, and I know this was the case on USA also, was that they were saying, well, I can't camp helm because if a 3-hit comes in and kicks me out, like, I'm going to get reset and missiled and stuff like that. And yeah, King could camp that helm for a little while if he wasn't under pressure, but in cases where he was,
so quick.
He was so quick. He got out of there, could just get over to the red or green tower really quick, and then just reestablish as soon as that's clear, or get a couple into the back of the 3-hit or whatever. So that speed still came in handy.
That's where that communication comes back. Like, if you can communicate well with, with your commander saying, I've been kicked or whatever from like that particular important spot of the maze, they can help you, retake it back if need be, so that you can continue to contribute to, the offense.
Yep. So on that note, that's another good natural segue is being a scout. Here's your best opportunity to give you the incentive to stay in shape for tournaments because you should be moving a lot as a scout. I won't say that I got into maybe the best shape of my life because I'm still older now than I was when I was playing laser tag when I was 19. I'm sure I was in better shape then, but definitely I upped the cardio regimen prepping for 2017 when I knew I was going to be playing a lot of scout at Nats, and it helped a lot because one thing that I think is really useful in almost any field, maybe it plays slightly different from field to field. Like obviously you play a little bit different than how it goes at Brisbane, but the best thing that scouts can do a lot of times is to control the midfield. And to do that, you're going to have to move around a lot. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're camping one location like Helm in Brisbane or the Tower in Detroit or one of the ramps in Auckland or something like that. But it means that you have places you can go where you can easily shift in between offense and defense since that's kind of your job.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've I've been in two states of physicality where, in my younger days, I was in much better shape and found it a lot easier to move around the maze. I don't think I ever played scout at a nationals, whilst I was kind of in relatively good shape. I played a scout in nationals in Sacramento. When was that tournament? 2014?
2012.
Yeah. I had to make the switch from heavy to scout because Baden, his back was playing up or something. He couldn't physically bend down as a scout, which you kind of need to do in that arena. And yeah, it's hard as balls if you if you're unfit trying to run around the maze. It's the worst.
To run around and crouch and to get super low, which I know came in handy a lot in 2017, was just trying to be a sneaky little bastard going over that catwalk. And if you can get below it and have to walk like that constantly, if your back and your quads and your hamstrings aren't kind of nice and toned up, you're going to be hurting at the end of the day.
And then, by day 2.5, you're in big trouble. You're basically monkey crap.
You never go full monkey crap.
Rest in peace, monkey crap's hip. But it's so important to be, especially as a scout, and I'd probably put commander in that bracket as well, but definitely as a scout to be in good shape, have good fitness.
Yeah, and I think that's important overall for any position. If you really look at most of the top teams, in most cases, all the players are going to be in pretty decent shape, are going to have trained a little bit before the tournament. But I think it is definitely important for a scout to have, good ability to move around, to be mobile, to crouch for long periods, to be able to sustain up kind of a running pace. Because the other thing that scouts can do is if you're in a situation where you're trying to get that elimination, the scouts are the ones who can be running around the whole time, keeping track of where the enemy players are going. Because that will allow the heavy and the commander to maybe get off a missile or start building toward that nuke. So if you're the ones who are trying to keep up with that fleeing player, so much the better for your team.
Yeah, because usually, towards the end of the game, if you've had a good game as a team, your scouts are usually in a decent position lives-wise. So if you've got good fitness, you can afford to legally chase your opponent around the maze and call out their position and be that scout,
Yeah, which let's qualify that here and clarify for the audience. When we say by legally chase, that means that you keep your gun pointed at the ground. This is the one time you don't keep your gun up, kids. You keep your gun pointed at the ground, or even sometimes behind your back, so you make it very clear to the referee that you're not targeting the opponent, maybe even calling out, not targeting this person as you run through, and then clarifying, where you're going, what they're doing, so that way your team knows what's going on.
Yeah, and if you do find yourself in a position where you have to, target that player, make sure you call out 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then do it. You don't want to leave anything to chance with the referees.
You still count Mississippi's in New
Well,
Zealand?
yeah, it seems like a magical place. I hear it's not, but it seems like a magical place.
It's a certain kind of magic. I'll tell
It's
you
not
that.
Tahiti. I hear Tahiti's a magical place. Um,
Yeah, but one Tahiti, two Tahiti is not 2
yeah,
seconds.
exactly
So
right. But yeah, make it as clear and obvious as possible.
yeah, absolutely. So that I think is big because I've seen that so many times. Sometimes in casual nights, but even in leagues in Sacramento, I'd see that toward the end of the game where you'd be trying to get that elimination and there's under 60 seconds. I would just see such a lack of urgency on the part of scouts, or they'd be posting up, staying stationary, or walking
Yeah,
around. I'm like, guys, it's time to
yeah.
run. And I know you're tired at the end of that 15 minutes, but that's all the more reason why get yourself in a situation where I was, in the run up to that Nats. I'm like, okay, I need to be able to run
Mm.
continuously for 40 to 45 minutes, which I really don't like running in terms of my fitness. I'm not thin. I can't just go out and run for 3 hours because I'm a crazy person.
Because Father
So it
Time.
really took a lot of sacrifice. But I'm like, but if I know I can run, on a treadmill or on the trail or something like that for 40, 45 minutes, I should be able to handle a 15-minute
Yeah.
game at that
Yeah,
point.
and really that post up role is for your medic. If assuming your medic is still in the game, yeah,
Yeah,
your job.
or your ammo or
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else. Your job is to keep moving to find the enemy player, is to
is to scout.
scout, like the name
Exactly right.
implies. So stay in shape, control the midfield, be able to pivot in between offense and defense. Sometimes when I'm training up newer players in SAC, what I would do to make sure that they didn't get bunched up is I would basically just kind of draw a diagonal down the middle of the map and say, look, this scout is going to handle this side of the maze. The other scout, you're going to handle the other side. So that way you guys don't get crossed up and you're not going to just be free resets for an enemy 3-hit who tracks down the
Yeah,
both of
yeah.
you. Because that's what I have told a lot of people when they take on some of the better players is the good commanders will know how to take advantage of that. If they have scouts who are bunched up, they're just going to start feasting on special points and building that nuke
Yeah.
super quick. So there are occasional situations where you might have scouts working in tandem, but by and large, you kind of want to be supporting the 3 hits and not sticking super close to your resup, not sticking super close to the other scout. If you can have your scouts who are posting up in different locations and controlling different parts of the field, that's so much more of just ground control and visibility that you have.
Yeah, exactly right. All right.
Okay, moving on to number 4. So number 4 is use hit differential to your advantage. I think hit differential is important for a lot of positions, but it will come through a lot more clearly as a scout because you have to tag an enemy 3-hit 3 times to put them down, hence the name 3-hit. You're going to be able to very quickly measure whether or not you're being effective in supporting your 3 hits and contributing overall to your team. Because if you're just going head to head with 3 hits and you're getting 1-to-1 every time, guess what? You're not helping out your team very much.
I'd put a caveat on that and say if you are taking one hit off the heavy every time you go into an opposition resup, which in turn means that your commander can take them down in one hit. That may be the only caveat, but generally, yeah,
Right. But that goes back to number 2, which is supporting your
That's
your
right,
3 hits in
Yeah.
that case. But yeah, you're it's very rarely going to be the case where that's all you're doing the
Yeah,
entire
true.
game. If that is the case, then hey,
Yeah.
go for it. But other than that, what I tell newer players is don't try to go head to head with the
Yeah.
3 hits. Get yourself in a position where you can get them in the back, where you're covering kind of the edge of the field or something like that, where people are going to have to creep by you, or if they want to go down the middle of the field, you're going to have a clean shot at their back. And if you can get all 3 hits into a 3-hit and they don't put you down, that's a net of 360 points for your team, because the enemy commander or heavy is going to lose 60 points. You're going to get 300. That's almost as much as a missile right there from being able to take down a 3-hit unopposed. That is a lot of points. Those rack up pretty quickly. Obviously, we're all going for the elimination wherever possible, but when games are going to time, and a lot of them are going to go to time in Detroit, you want to be on top and you want to have the most points. The scouts are the ones a lot of times that are going to be making that difference, because 3 hits are going to be going head to head a lot. Their hit differential is probably going to be pretty close to 1. I mean, maybe if they're really good, it'll be up around the 1.3, 1.4 mark if they've had a really great game. But it's the scouts who are going to be getting up to that hit differential of like 1.5, 1.7. If you can get up somewhere close to 2, you think about how much of an advantage that gives your team in terms of your point scoring, that you have provided twice as much of an advantage to your team as, just a replacement level. I'm always going 1-to-1 with the enemy players. That adds up really, really quickly. So use that hit differential to your advantage.
I would say this one is probably maybe maze dependent. In our maze, historically, a lot of the time, it's basically you get eliminations, because both teams are basically trying to break a resup. Whereas it's more, I know it's supposed to always be about that, but a lot of mazes do have more of a control zone. Zones of the maze aspect, whereas Auckland, I guess, doesn't really have that. So if you're not attacking the resupply, you're basically doing nothing, because the action's happening generally at either resupply. Not a lot's happening in sort of the outer zones of the maze. So whilst it is really important that your hit diff is up, achieving that through trying to shoot people in the back doesn't always happen in our maze. So I think depending on your maze, you'll see your hit diff go up or down. I know that with Sacramento you could see large sections of the arena, and not easy, but it's more likely that you could shoot opposing 3 hits in the back. Same with Brisbane, But yeah, Auckland, because it's so mazy, it's a lot harder to do that because you can't see across large spans of the arena.
Have you guys considered just getting better?
We're trying. We're trying.
No, I'm just around. Yeah, obviously it is going to be kind of field dependent. But I just feel like I've seen enough fields, ones that play fast versus ones that play slow, that the better scouts almost always are going to have close to the best hit differential in the tournament. And again, I think if you're getting above kind of like the 1.7, 1.8 range, you're really elite in terms of the kind of value you're providing to your team, just on a kind of point scoring basis, because there really isn't anybody else who's going to be able to do that kind of thing consistently, just because of the nature of the game, because scouts get taken down in 1 hit and they have to put 3 shots into an enemy 3 hit to get them down.
And to be fair, we do have a lot of players that do have relatively high hit diff when they play scout. It happens. It does happen. But there are mazes that lend themselves to that more so than maybe our home maze.
Yeah, but that is something that I point out to newer players, though, is even in situations where you maybe don't feel like you've been that effective as a scout because you haven't scored a lot of points, because that's not always your job, check your hit differential. For newer players, the first thing I'm like, you got to cross the barrier to get over 1. So at least you're putting out as many points as the enemy is taking off of you. That's step 1, is get above that 1.0 hit differential. And then if you're getting up from there, then you're already providing more value to your team than the enemy is reaping off of you.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I guess at our maze, I think our hit diff sort of for scouts floats around that 1.5, like for good scouts between 1.5 and 2. So that's right.
Yeah, and that's
right
really
in that
good.
Range.
Yeah. So just in general, I think using hit diff to your advantage, because of just the nature of the breakdowns, you see the difference in hit differential much more at scout than other places. Obviously, if you have a really high hit differential as a commander or heavy, that's great, but there are going to be situations where maybe you sacrifice some hit differential to do more damage to the other team. Like in the most extreme example, right, if you look at like last year, Hoodlum's hit differential was abysmal. It was awful. But he did a lot of damage to enemy
Yeah,
medics. He got Meta Killer and was willing to put his body on the
yeah,
line for that. Sometimes quite
yeah.
literally
Like
to
he would
achieve
get
that.
killed every time, but he would generally, take a life from the medic. So it would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, work out like his hit diff versus his medic hits. Um, and find out, okay, so every every third shot he makes, he takes a life off a medic or something. That'd be that'd be interesting to see.
Russ, we got a new
Yeah,
job
buddy,
for you.
get on it.
Stats night breakdown. But no, I seriously have done kind of breakdowns for that because I really started kind of getting into the efficiency of different shots versus resupply and things like that. Specifically in the run up to the Sacramento tournament, because I was really trying to pull out any tool I could have to try to just weasel out any advantage we could get against Brisbane, which ultimately came to nothing because we still lost. But hey, it was still a fun
Yeah,
project.
exactly.
And trying to drill down on, okay, well, what's an acceptable hit differential to trade for getting medic hits? How often are we going to need to succeed at elimination? Because especially if you're going to give up a lot of points trying to get those medic hits, you better make sure you get that elimination.
Yeah, exactly.
So, which if I'd done better in supporting Hoodlum last year, we could have done. We could have done.
You played Commander for the most part last year with them.
I popped around all over the place because we started out the week. I was playing Commander and he was playing Scout. Then we kind of moved it around because Al wasn't really feeling heavy, so we moved Hoodlum to Commander and me to Heavy. But then we were having problems on the back end, so I switched to Ammo. I think on the third day, and that seemed to work a lot better. But just overall, we were at, I think, too much of a deficit. But I love playing Ammo, especially in Brisbane. But we'll save that for the Ammo podcast.
I think Night Owl had got himself into, obviously he was in the best shape of his playing career. It was just itching to get out and do some damage rather than sort of taking that kind of that heavy role.
He was in great shape, but a little bit out of practice.
True. I mean, the boys hadn't played since the previous Brisbane Nationals, so it was a long time between drinks for them. Wow.
Well, not the long between drinks. All right. Okay. So final point is getting back to the issue of Hoodlum is you can score those sneaky hits on the medic. So although so much of the game is about supporting your team, supporting your 3 hits, controlling the midfield, push comes to shove, you can still do damage as a scout. And if you can just be that sneaky person who's getting in and getting those kind of cheap medic hits, sometimes that I call them, that can also be really helpful for the team. Again, going back to 2017, it wasn't my initial goal going in. I was like, I really don't think I'm going to have any shot at getting Meta Killer this year because this is not my goal. My goal is to make sure I control the midfield, to make sure that Venom can get in and do his thing, to communicate to Sean when Rusty's coming in and, what side the 3 hits are playing in. But in a few different games, just kind of in the flow of the game, I found myself that I might have been the only person who was on offense. So if I can kind of sneak in the back door and just pop a quick one into the medic and then kind of get away, then hey, you're already whittling them down and getting them into a situation where those commander's nukes are going to be that much more efficient. So learn how to be sneaky, how to operate around, because you can't just kind of go in guns blazing a lot of times as a scout because you're going to get taken down in one hit. So sometimes you have to find the crafty ways to get in, to go to the side that the heavy isn't defending from, to wait until you hear them put down the heavy, or they're kind of looking in the other direction. If you're playing in a 2-floor maze and your team has been kicked downstairs, well, maybe you take it upon yourself to go up and kind of do some guerrilla warfare upstairs while the enemy team is trying to resupply. Or if they've sent all their attackers after your resupply, well, maybe you're going to catch theirs unawares.
And it's interesting because I think as a newer player, your initial movement around the maze is very janky, very cautious, and then once you get a kind of feel, I think a lot of people sort of flip the other way. They become overzealous. They think that, okay, if I've got to, this is what I noticed in our maze anyway, I've got to run in there and just shoot whoever I can as quickly as possible and then die and just do that over and over again. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes running in guns blazing is not always the correct way to do it. you can be smarter. You can be a little cautious. You can, you know, you can take the alternative route than just relying on pure speed and timing. If that's not one of your strong
and
suits.
this is gonna vary a little bit from player to player too. Obviously, this is one of the few areas in my life where not being particularly tall has been an advantage to me. Is being able to sneak around a laser tag maze.
Shout out to Pint Size.
Shout out to Pint Size and all the other vertically challenged players.
Meow out of there. Brisbane.
So you can use that to, if you're small enough that you can fit behind the missile in Brisbane, then hey, you can be extra sneaky.
Exactly
right. Obviously, if you're Baden or Fredo or Morange, maybe sneakiness isn't always your best tool that you have, but visibility definitely is. So there are going to be different ways for scouts to succeed in other ways. I know in 2010, back in Chula Vista, Baden's height and being able to get over some of those walls created an utter nightmare for trying to break into your guys' resupply. Now, granted, we were playing with the janky rules, but even so, I think he might have been able to legally get over some of those walls and just kind of create havoc there. So whether you're short, whether you're tall, there are definite ways that you can use your physicality to your advantage to get some of those helpful kind of field control things for your team.
It's harder being, I think, for some arenas, it's harder being in that kind of mid-range where you're not short enough to creep around and you're not tall enough to see distance. I find that with Brisbane, like if you're at either end of the spectrum, you do pretty well there. If you're kind of smack bang in the middle, you gotta rely on your natural talent and maybe your fitness. But
fitness is always good. Again, you use your physicality to your advantage.
Absolutely. But I think that also ties into being a smarter player. Taking a beat to kind of think about your situation and being able to make the best decision based on what that situation is.
Yeah, it's maybe not quite as cerebral of a position as commander, but it's definitely up there. I tend to tell a lot of players that scout is the easiest position to learn, but it is one of the hardest to master because there are almost always little tweaks you can make to your game to just squeeze out that little bit more of efficiency that's going to be helpful for you. Might make a difference.
You can get by, without doing those things, but if you can master those things, your ability to play the position it grows so much.
Yeah. So it's one of the hardest to master. I still argue that heavy is ultimately both the hardest to learn and the hardest to master for a variety of different reasons. But scout, I think is maybe there is I think a certain kind of mindset to playing heavy. I was when we roll around to that podcast, I kind of compare it in some ways to being a keeper in soccer or being the kicker in football or being a pitcher in baseball, where you're kind of you're kind of the oddball, the odd man out on the team, where you're kind of on your own island and you need to be very much in your own head and have your own kind of control of the
I'm
game.
Looking forward to that podcast.
So coming soon.
But do you want to just do a quick recap of the points?
Yep, absolutely. So point number 1 is to take the term scout literally. Be a scout. Be the person who is communicating everything to your team and keeping eyes out for things, which means not crowding your resupply. If you're back crouched in a resupply, you're not helping anyone. So be a scout, be mobile, be the eyes and ears of your team. Point number 2, probably the most important thing, the single most important thing I can impart to players is support your 3 hits.
We appreciate
Scouts can make a big difference, but 3 hits are really where the kind of raw offense and the raw power of the game is coming in. So support them. 3 is control the midfield, or maybe not the midfield if it's Auckland or a maze that plays a little bit differently, but at least kind of control your zone of the field so that way you can pivot easily in between offense and defense. I think the kind of distinction in between offense and defense is a little bit overrated in terms of the way that people talk about Laser Force, where it's like, well, there's the defensive side, there's the offensive side. But I think especially with scouts, being able to pivot in between those kind of seamlessly is a really important thing. So that's really what I mean by controlling the midfield. It may not mean a zone of control, but being able to kind of swing easily in between different roles.
Yeah, swinging.
We always love the swingers. 4 is use hit differential to your advantage. Since it's going to take 3 shots for you to take down the enemy 3 hit and only 1 for them to put you down, that means that your hit differential should be higher than other players just as a kind of mechanical operation of the game. And then if your hit differential is really high, you're providing a lot more value to your team in terms of point scoring than a lot of other players are. Again, you don't have missiles, so you can't get necessarily those super high value kinds of plays. But if you take down a 3 hit without getting shot, that's still a net 360 gain for your team. It's not quite as much as a missile, but it's still pretty damn good.
Just in case you don't know, there is the website lfstats.com. And if your site, plays regular Space Marines, it's likely that your stats are going to be uploaded to that site. That's probably the most important stat, I think. That and maybe medikits, but that one's one of the most important stats to pay attention to. If you want to improve your game and need a focus point, try using that as your focus. Focus on your hit diff. Because if your hit diff is low, have a chat to some of your vets about how you can improve that, or things that you can do just to improve that stat. And if you improve that stat, you'll probably notice that your game in general, goes up. I think that the two are intrinsically linked.
Yeah, hot take, guys. If you shoot more people than you get shot, that's good.
I mean, you're not wrong.
And then point 5 was be the sneaky guerrilla warfare kind of person who can maybe get those extra hits on the medic. We can't all be hoodlum. We can't all have a teleporter, but all of us can use our physicality in different ways to either get kind of long shots if you're tall, or to kind of creep under walls if you're short. So that way you can get around and get some extra hits on the medic or get extra resets on people who are going by. So be able to get yourself in an advantageous position where you're going to be able to help your team, and not just communicate, but actually score some of those extra points. It's rare that a scout's going to be leading the offense by themselves, but hey, if those moments come around, you might have the opportunity to shine.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I mean, obviously this is just our opinion. We've been playing the game for quite a while, so we have a good feel of how the game's played. But there are, obviously other players that have their opinions too, and a lot of them are fantastic players. So if you do have somebody's been playing the game for a while, but not just that, but at a high level, make sure you hit them up. Like, don't be afraid to ask them for some help or some advice, because I'm sure most people are pretty open to helping. And if someone at your site isn't like that, contact one of us or contact somebody from the scene, because if you show a willingness to learn and expand your game, people are pretty open to talking about Laser Force with you. Like you said earlier, we could talk about Laser Force all day if we could.
I gotta do something since I can't play right now.
Exactly right. You got that itch. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that's probably going to cover it for at least the intro Scout podcasting. And this is aimed a little bit at sort of developing players, things like that. So we have a sort of archive or record that we can point to newer players of, well, what are some ways I can improve at these positions? So I wouldn't ever describe these podcasts as the end-all be-all for this is how you must play this position. Obviously, really good players are going to have their own take, and they're going to have to improvise. And being able to improvise is a key thing that you will learn as you go through. But if I had to distill kind of the 5 things that I would tell people, that are looking to improve their scout game, that was kind of the list that I narrowed it down to.
It's about as nuanced as trying to pick your top Marvel Cinematic Universe films. It's difficult, but if you had to choose.
Difficult, but Thor Dark World still sucked, so we can already put that at the bottom.
Alright, well, that'll do us for this week. I've been Guy Next Door.
And I've been DK.
Always remember to backtrack, kids. We will see you next week, hopefully.
Yep.